In this new lesson about Grasshopper, we're going to investigate the last of the tutorial files, so number 7 or column arcade, and we're going to see some other important notions about how to manage the points and curves, and then how we get from that to surfaces, polysurfaces, and solid, so from 2D and 3D. So what we're seeing here is a series of arcs positioned on some lines. So these are the arcades, and they are like following the shape of this surface, which is not a 3D solid, or it's in 3D, so it's positioned in 3D, but it's not a solid, and it's a little bit different. To have a polysurface, open polysurface, and a solid, or just a surface. Now the final result here are some arcs that you can see there, and they are all at the same height, so they're all positioned on one plane. And then we have these lines at the top, and we have these, you can see these lines are positioned on the surface between two different sets of points or lists of points, which we can see there. So the bottom points are positioned on the surface, the top points are all on one plane. And so it's not so complex, but there are some important things to know. Now, if I click here in this first text, in this first node, we can see there is a surface, or SRF node, which stands for a surface. And these can be found in the parameters here, in the standard geometry parameters. So you can see there's the surface. Now the surface can be created manually in Rhino, can be created with many tools in Rhino, and it can be associated or referenced from Rhino into Grasshopper. Now if I do that right now, so if I right click and set, you can see there is no references here in the scene. There is only one surface, which is the one already used, but this is also internalized, meaning that it's not more in Rhino, but it's like embedded into Grasshopper, so we can bake it to put it back into Rhino. But let me show you here. Also in Rhino we have the menus, and they follow a precise path. So here we have the surfaces, so we can create a surface right away from here, and then we can set that as the base surface. Or we have here the ribbons or the toolbars. So we have the surface tools, and here you have all the editing tools and the creation tools for the surfaces. So we need to create a Nurbs surface from Rhino and then associate it with the node of the surface in Grasshopper. And we can also internalize it or not. It's an option, but we're gonna see how it works. And once you internalize, that's gonna become a permanent part of the Grasshopper file. So this one here is internalized, as you can see here. So there are different steps. Once we create it, we can then reference it, and then we can internalize it or not. But first we need to create it. So let's do some example. I'm gonna do a complex, like one of these could be created by 2, 3, or 4 edges, which are curves. So we always start with a point or with the curve, and then we go from there to create a surface. So otherwise, I just can create a single plane, a simple flat surface bidimensional. This is 2-dimensional because a plane as 2 dimension is completely flat on the construction plane. So we can use it if we want a flat result. So if I now go and, well, if I select first the plane and then select the node in Grasshopper, right click and do set one surface, you can see that we have established the connection here. So this is what it means to be referenced from Rhino. And then I click and hold Control to unplug the original surface, and then click and drag with the left mouse and plug in the new surface, which is the flat surface. So you can see now that the various arcades are positioned exactly on the construction plane or on that surface plane I just created. So by changing the the connection here, I can change the results, the final results of everything. And again, this is the power of parametric and modeling and visual scripting and generative design in Grasshopper. So I'm just going to do another test. I want to do a fit plane through points. We created a fit line through points before. So again, we are moving from curves and points into surfaces, which is the natural path that we do both in Rhino and in Grasshopper. So also in Rhino, you have like menus on the top and the toolbars that you can see they go from curves, and then you have surfaces, and then you have solids. So if I go here to curve tools, I can start creating curves, or I can go in the standard menu here and just create points. Now left mouse for the single point, right mouse for the multiple points, and then you have curves, and then you have surfaces. You can follow here the path on the standard, and then you have solids, and then tools for solids, etc., etc. So that's the natural path, going from monodimensional like point, then bidimensional like lines and curves, and then three-dimensional like surfaces, polysurfaces, and solids. So I'm going to click on the point, and that's going to be 1 point. If I right click, I can access the multiple points features. So I'm going to click a bunch of times here in the space. You can see they all go in the construction plane, because when you create something in Rhino, it goes in the construction plane. It's going to snap to that construction plane. But if I want to move them around and make them three-dimensional, at least in the position. So don't confuse, the point is a monodimensional object, but it can be positioned in 3 dimensions. So it can go up and down with a Z, not only in the X and the epsilon. Now, if you want, you can find the Rhino video course also in the channel if you don't know enough about Rhino. So I'm skipping here some pretty important like basic information on Rhino because we are focusing more on Grasshopper. But you know, this is something important also talking about Grasshopper, because many times we can use Rhino and then go into Grasshopper. Like this time we need to create a surface in Rhino manually. Now, if I create a fit, let's go back here, surface tools, toolbar, and then I find here the fit plane, or if I want to access that quicker, I can find it in the standard here. So follow the path. So point, curves, closed shapes, then you have surfaces. So click on there, and the little arrow on the bottom right corner is going to expand the surface toolbar. I can extract it, I can undock it, and then I can expand this, and I can put it somewhere in my interface. I can dock it again somewhere, or I can just leave it floating. Many times I leave it floating. I like it floating like this. So it's when I'm working on something, I usually bring out the toolbar and I leave it like this so I can access this quickly. So click on the fit plane, and that's going to be an average plane created between those point clouds. So it's a flat plane again, but it's not 2D. This time it's 3D because it's a little bit, you know, oblique. It's moving into the Z. It's not completely flat. So I can use this. Again, I'm going to create a surface from the standard parameters geometry here in Grasshopper, and then set one surface, click, and there you go. So you either select before the surface and then the node and then set one surface, or you can just right click, set one surface, and then click on one surface that you have in Rhino. And then if you click this to substitute the previous one, now you can see that the arcades are following this new surface. So you can create as many surfaces as you want, and then you can make the connection. Now I want to change the color here for the preview because it's a little bit gray, and actually I didn't change it. So let me go back, and you need to click and drag. Okay. So now we can see better the not in gray the various components of this. And also what I want to do is go and